Maria Santos wiped the sweat from her forehead as she looked across the golden wheat fields of New Harmony. The morning sun cast long shadows across the farmland, and she could hear her children playing near the old oak tree they had planted when they first arrived 15 years ago. Her husband Carlos was fixing the irrigation system, whistling an old Earth song that reminded them both of home. New Harmony was everything they had dreamed of when they left Earth. Clean air, open spaces, and soil so rich that crops grew faster than anywhere in human space. The colony was home to over 2 million people now, spread across 3 continents on a world that seemed made for farming. Small towns dotted the landscape, connected by simple roads and filled with families who had come looking for a better life. The children attended school in the mornings and helped with farm work in the afternoons. Neighbors helped neighbors during harvest season. On Sundays, people gathered in the town squares for markets and festivals. It was the kind of peaceful life that many humans dreamed about but few ever found. Maria was loading vegetables into her truck when the first ships appeared in the sky. At first, she thought they were human vessels bringing supplies or new colonists. The ships were massive, much larger than the transport vessels that usually visited New Harmony. They hung in the blue sky like dark clouds, blocking out portions of the sun. "Carlos," she called to her husband. "Come look at this." Carlos dropped his tools and walked over to where Maria stood. More ships kept appearing, filling the sky above their farm. These were not human ships. The designs were strange, with curved hulls that seemed to flow like water. Some had spikes jutting from their sides while others looked like giant insects with metallic wings. "Those are not our ships," Carlos said quietly. His voice carried worry that made Maria's stomach turn cold. In the town of Riverside, Mayor Tom Chen stood on the steps of City Hall, staring up at the alien fleet through his binoculars. He had served in the human navy before coming to New Harmony, and he knew military formations when he saw them. This was not a peaceful visit. "Get me the communications center," he told his assistant. "Send a message to these ships, tell them we welcome peaceful contact and ask what they need." The alien fleet made no response to the human messages. Instead, more ships kept arriving through hyperspace, their numbers growing from dozens to hundreds, to thousands. The sky above New Harmony grew dark with their shadows. On the flagship of the alien fleet, Admiral Thexvar of the Zenthari examined the human colony below through the ship's sensors. The primitive creatures had spread across the planet like an infection, turning wild lands into ordered farms and building their simple settlements wherever they pleased. "These humans multiply too quickly," he told his officers. "They have expanded into 12 star systems in the past 50 years. If we allow this to continue, they will compete with civilized species for resources." The other officers nodded in agreement. The Hegemony Alliance had watched human expansion with growing concern. Humans bred fast, adapted quickly to new environments, and showed no respect for the traditional boundaries that older species had established over thousands of years. "Sir," asked Commander Rilix, a being with 4 arms and silver skin, "should we not offer them terms of surrender first? The Galactic Council requires that we give primitive species a chance to submit peacefully." Admiral Thexvar's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. "The Council also requires that primitive species learn their place in the Galactic Order. These humans need a lesson they will never forget. We will make an example of this colony that will teach all humans to stay in their own small corner of space." Below on New Harmony, people began to panic as the alien ships took positions in orbit. Families loaded their vehicles with belongings and tried to flee to other towns, but there was nowhere to go. The alien fleet surrounded the entire planet. Maria and Carlos gathered their children in their small farmhouse kitchen. 8-year-old Ana pressed close to her mother, while 12-year-old Diego tried to act brave but couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. "What do they want, Papa?" Ana asked in a small voice. Carlos hugged his daughter tight. "I don't know, little one, but we'll stay together no matter what happens." In the capital city of New Promise, Governor Lisa Park activated the colony's emergency systems. Warning sirens began to wail across every settlement on New Harmony. She opened communications channels to Earth, knowing it would take weeks for any message to reach home across the vast distances of space. "This is Governor Park of the New Harmony colony," she spoke into the transmitter. "We are under threat from an unknown alien fleet. They have not responded to our attempts at communication. If anyone receives this message, please send help." The message rockets launched from hidden facilities across the planet, carrying their desperate plea into the darkness between the stars. Admiral Thexvar watched the human preparations with cold interest. "Let them send their messages. Let them prepare their defenses, it would make no difference. The hegemony fleet carried enough firepower to turn the entire planet's surface into molten glass. Begin the demonstration, he ordered. The first bombardment struck the northern continent just after noon. Beams of pure energy lanced down from the alien ships, striking cities and towns with surgical precision. Buildings that had taken years to construct vanished in seconds, replaced by craters of fused earth and metal. Maria felt the ground shake beneath their farmhouse as explosions lit the horizon. Through their windows, she could see pillars of fire rising into the sky from the direction of New Promise. The capital city was burning. "We have to get to the shelter," Carlos said, taking his family's hands. They ran across their yard toward the underground bunker that colonial regulations required every farm to have. Behind them, their house exploded as an energy beam found its target. The oak tree that had shaded their home for 15 years burst into flames. The bombardment continued for hours. The alien fleet moved across New Harmony's sky like angels of death, destroying everything humans had built on the planet's surface. Towns, farms, factories, schools, all of it burned under the relentless assault. In shelters across the planet, families huddled together and prayed. Some shelters took direct hits and were vaporized instantly. Others held, protecting their occupants for a few more precious hours of life. As night fell on New Harmony, Admiral Thexvar surveyed his work. The planet's surface glowed with thousands of fires. Every human settlement had been targeted and destroyed. Orbital sensors detected no significant life signs remaining on the surface. "Record a message for the humans," he told his communications officer. "Tell them that New Harmony has been cleansed for violating the territorial boundaries established by civilized species. Any further human expansion into hegemony space will result in similar consequences. Let them know that primitive species exist only at the sufferance of their betters." The message beacon was left in orbit around the dead world as the hegemony fleet prepared to depart. Admiral Thexvar was satisfied with the operation. The humans would receive their message and understand that they were nothing more than insects in a galaxy ruled by superior beings. The alien ships vanished into hyperspace, leaving New Harmony burning behind them. On the surface, the underground shelters fell silent one by one as their life support systems failed, or their occupants succumbed to radiation and injuries. Maria Santos died holding her children, whispering promises that help would come even as she knew no help could reach them in time. Carlos died trying to dig through the collapsed entrance to their shelter. Governor Park died at her post, sending final status reports until the capital's communication systems failed. 2,300,000 human souls were extinguished in 6 hours of methodical destruction. New Harmony, once a symbol of human hope and determination, became a monument to alien cruelty and the dangerous naivety of a species that had believed the galaxy might welcome them as friends. The message from New Harmony reached Earth on a Tuesday morning. Captain Rebecca Walsh sat in the communications center deep beneath the Pacific, watching the automated distress signals play across her screens. The data was clear and terrible. Orbital bombardment, complete surface sterilization, no survivors detected. She had served in the Colonial Defense Force for 20 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. New Harmony had been humanity's most successful agricultural colony, a place where families went to build better lives. Now it was a graveyard orbiting a distant star. "Ma'am," said Lieutenant Torres, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "We're receiving confirmation from 3 other monitoring stations. The data is consistent across all sources." Captain Walsh closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of her sister who had moved to New Harmony 5 years ago to start a farming cooperative. Sarah had sent pictures just last month showing her children playing in fields of golden grain under an alien sun. "Send the data to Colonial Command," she ordered. "Full priority transmission to all government centers. And Lieutenant, make sure the families are notified through proper channels." Across Earth, the news spread through official channels like a slow-burning fire. President Chen received the briefing in her office overlooking the rebuilt New York skyline. She read the report 3 times before setting it down with shaking hands. "How many?" she asked General Morrison, her military advisor. 2.3 million confirmed dead, Madam President. Every settlement on the planet was targeted systematically. This wasn't random violence. It was planned extermination. The president stood and walked to her window, looking out at the bustling city below. 12 billion humans lived in the Sol system now, with colonies spreading across 37 worlds. Until this moment, she had believed that humanity's expansion into space represented hope for the future. Now she wondered if they had simply made themselves targets for forces they didn't understand. "What do we know about who did this?" she asked. General Morrison activated a holographic display showing the alien fleet that had destroyed New Harmony. Intelligence suggests it was a combined force from the Hegemony Alliance. 12 different species working together. They left a message beacon claiming that New Harmony violated their territorial boundaries. Territorial boundaries we were never told existed, the president said quietly. Yes, ma'am. It appears they consider our expansion to be some kind of threat to their interests. The president was quiet for a long moment, studying the images of the alien ships. They were beautiful in a way, their curved hulls and flowing designs showing the aesthetic sense of ancient civilizations. But beauty meant nothing when it served such ugly purposes. What are our military options, General? Morrison shook his head. Limited, Madam President. The Colonial Defense Force has maybe 200 ships scattered across human space. Intelligence estimates the hegemony controls over 50,000 military vessels. In a direct confrontation, we would be obliterated, just like New Harmony. On Mars, Dr. Elena Vasquez sat in her laboratory reviewing the technical data from the attack. As Earth's leading expert on alien technology, she had been called to analyze the weapons used against New Harmony. The results were sobering. The energy signatures suggest plasma-based orbital bombardment systems, she explained to the assembled scientists. Much more advanced than anything in our current arsenal. They can sterilize a planet's surface from orbit with surgical precision. Can we defend against it? Asked Dr. Kim from the Weapons Development Division. Dr. Vasquez pulled up defensive projections on her screens. Not with current technology. Their ships appear to be both faster and more heavily armed than ours. We would need to completely revolutionize our approach to ship design and manufacturing. In the asteroid belt, mining operations continued as normal, but conversations in the worker habitats took on a different tone. Miners who had spent years extracting resources for peaceful expansion now found themselves wondering if their work was feeding the machinery of their own destruction. My cousin lived on New Harmony, said Joe Martinez, operating a massive mining robot from his control booth. Had 3 kids. The oldest was just starting school. His partner Sarah nodded grimly. We all knew someone there. Question is, what do we do about it? The answer came not from the workers, but from the governments and corporations that controlled human industry. Within days of receiving the New Harmony data, secret meetings began in boardrooms and military facilities across the Sol system. In the depths of Luna City, Admiral Sarah Chen called together the surviving members of the Colonial Defense Force High Command. The conference room was small and windowless, its walls lined with screens showing tactical data from across human space. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Chen began, we have a problem that requires an unprecedented solution. The hegemony has declared war on humanity. Even if they haven't used those exact words, they've demonstrated both the capability and willingness to exterminate our colonies whenever they choose. The other officers shifted uncomfortably. Admiral Chen had lost her daughter in the attack on New Harmony, her granddaughter too. Everyone in the room knew that this briefing was as much about vengeance as it was about strategy. Our current fleet strength is insufficient to challenge even a small portion of hegemony forces, she continued. Traditional military thinking would suggest negotiation or submission. I'm here to propose a different approach. She activated the room's main display, showing industrial capacity charts for the entire Sol system. Humanity's greatest advantage has always been our ability to organize and produce at massive scale. Other species might have superior individual ships, but none of them can match our potential for mass manufacturing. Commander Harrison, head of fleet logistics, leaned forward. Admiral, even if we converted every shipyard in human space to military production, we couldn't build enough ships fast enough to matter. It would take decades, which is why we're not going to use existing shipyards, Admiral Chen replied. She changed the display to show detailed scans of the asteroid belt. We're going to build new ones, thousands of them, fully automated facilities, capable of producing warships at a rate no one has ever imagined. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. What Admiral Chen was proposing would require converting the entire human economy into a war machine. Every resource, every facility, every person in human space would be dedicated to a single goal: building a fleet large enough to not just challenge the hegemony, but to overwhelm them completely. The politicians are already on board, she continued. President Chen has signed Executive Order 2387, placing all human military and industrial assets under unified command for the duration of the crisis. Every corporation, every government, every colony will contribute to this effort. On Earth, the public response was carefully managed. News of New Harmony's destruction was released slowly, with emphasis on the need for unity and preparedness, rather than panic. Families grieved for their lost loved ones, but the greater population was told that diplomatic solutions were being pursued. Behind the scenes, however, the greatest mobilization in human history was beginning. Factory workers found their shifts extended to round-the-clock operations. Engineers were reassigned from civilian projects to military research. Transportation networks were quietly reorganized to move resources toward strategic industrial centers. Ambassador Kelix of the Zenthari, stationed on Earth to monitor human activities, filed his regular reports with growing confusion. The humans have ceased all external expansion activities, he wrote to his superiors. Their merchant vessels have recalled from deep space routes. Diplomatic communications have become formal and infrequent. What Ambassador Kelix could not see were the massive construction projects beginning in the outer reaches of the Sol system. Using automated systems and artificial intelligence that surpassed anything the hegemony had developed, humans were building the infrastructure for a new kind of warfare. In the Kuiper Belt, robotic mining ships began extracting materials at unprecedented rates. Near Jupiter, construction platforms the size of cities took shape, designed to build warships using modular techniques that could produce finished vessels in weeks rather than years. The human economy transformed overnight from one focused on growth and expansion to one dedicated entirely to war production. But this transformation happened in complete silence, hidden from alien observers who expected humans to respond with either desperate diplomacy or hopeless military posturing. Instead, humanity simply stopped talking to the outside galaxy. Trade routes were abandoned. Diplomatic channels went quiet. To alien observers, it appeared that the lesson of New Harmony had been learned, and humans were retreating into their own small corner of space. Admiral Chen stood in the command center, on Titan, watching construction reports flow across dozens of screens. The massive industrial complex around her hummed with activity, as thousands of workers and millions of automated systems worked toward a single goal. "How long until the first production runs are complete?" she asked her chief engineer. 18 months for the shipyards to reach full capacity, came the reply. "After that, we'll be producing finished warships faster than any civilization in recorded history." 18 months after New Harmony burned, the Sol system had become unrecognizable. Where once peaceful trade ships had carried goods between worlds, now massive cargo vessels moved raw materials to construction sites that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. Marcus Webb stood in the observation deck of Platform 7, watching another completed battleship slide from its construction bay into the darkness of space. As chief production coordinator for the Jupiter sector, he oversaw 43 automated shipyards that together produced more warships in a single week than most civilizations built in a decade. "That's number 4,732, announced his assistant Dr. Yuki Tanaka, checking the data on her tablet. "The Vengeance class is exceeding all production estimates." Marcus nodded, studying the sleek lines of the newest warship through the transparent aluminum windows. Each vessel was exactly 800 meters long, built using the most advanced human technology ever developed. They were smaller than traditional battleships used by other species, but what they lacked in individual size, they made up for in numbers and advanced systems. "How are the weapon tests going?" he asked. "Excellent results from the firing ranges near Io," Dr. Tanaka replied. "The plasma cannons are delivering 30% more power than the original specifications called for. And the new shielding systems are performing better than anything the hegemony has shown us. The ships being built in the Sol system were unlike anything seen before in the galaxy. While other species built massive dreadnoughts that took years to construct and required enormous crews, humans had designed vessels that could be manufactured using almost entirely automated systems and operated by crews of fewer than 50 people each. Every component was standardized and modular: weapon systems, engines, life support. Everything could be assembled by robotic systems that never tired, never made mistakes, and never stopped working. The shipyards operated 24 hours a day, building vessels at a pace that would have seemed impossible to traditional military thinkers. On Mars, the red planet's surface was now covered with factories that stretched from pole to pole. Dr. James Morrison walked through production facility Delta 7, watching millions of robotic arms work in perfect coordination to assemble ship components. The noise was overwhelming, a constant symphony of cutting, welding, and assembly that never stopped. "The armor plating production is ahead of schedule," shouted his foreman over the industrial din. "We're producing enough hull sections to armor 20 ships per day from this facility alone." Dr. Morrison smiled grimly. Mars had been transformed from a research outpost into the largest manufacturing center in human space. The planet's lower gravity made it ideal for constructing the massive components needed for warship construction, while its proximity to the asteroid belt ensured a steady supply of raw materials. But the real innovation was happening in the asteroid belt itself. Hundreds of mining platforms had been converted into mobile factories that could break down entire asteroids and transform them into finished warship components in a matter of days. Captain Lisa Santos piloted her mining ship toward asteroid XK-739, a iron-rich rock the size of a small moon. Her ship wasn't alone. Dozens of other vessels surrounded the asteroid like mechanical flies, each one equipped with the latest in automated mining and manufacturing technology. "Beginning mineral extraction sequence," she announced to the coordination center on Ceres Station. Within minutes, her ship extended massive drilling arms that began boring into the asteroid's core. The extracted material was fed directly into onboard factories that sorted, refined, and shaped it into the components needed for warship construction. Other ships worked on different aspects of the process. Some extracted rare metals needed for computer systems and weapons. Others processed ice into fuel and life support supplies. Still others assembled the finished components into complete subsections that could be shipped to the final assembly points near Jupiter and Saturn. The entire operation was coordinated by artificial intelligence systems that surpassed anything previously developed by human science. These AIs could track millions of individual components, optimize production schedules across hundreds of facilities, and adjust manufacturing processes in real time to maintain maximum efficiency. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center on Titan, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the status of every shipyard, factory, and mining operation in the Sol system. The scale of what humanity had accomplished in less than 2 years was staggering, even to her. "Current fleet." "Strength?" she asked her aide. 47,000 completed vessels, Admiral. Another 15,000 in final assembly. Production rate is holding steady at 200 new ships per day across all facilities." Admiral Chen studied the tactical displays showing mock battle formations. Each red dot represented a human warship, and there were so many dots that they seemed to merge into solid clouds of color. But she wasn't satisfied yet. "What's our projected fleet size at full operational capacity?" "Conservative estimates put us at 500,000 vessels within the next 6 months, Admiral. If we continue expanding production facilities, we could reach 1 million ships within the year." The numbers were almost impossible to comprehend. The largest space battle in recorded galactic history had involved maybe 1,000 ships total. Humanity was preparing to field a fleet 500 times larger than that. But Admiral Chen knew that numbers alone wouldn't guarantee victory. The ships also had to be effective in combat, which was why so much effort had been put into developing new military technologies. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the weapons testing facility on Europa, watching the latest prototype plasma cannon reduce a target asteroid to its component atoms. The weapon was mounted on a test platform that mimicked the power systems of the new Vengeance-class battleships. "Beam coherence is holding stable at maximum output," reported her lead technician. "No power fluctuations detected. The targeting system is maintaining accuracy within 0.001%. Dr. Vasquez made notes on her tablet, comparing the results to similar weapons used by hegemony forces. The human plasma cannons were actually more powerful than their alien counterparts, thanks to advances in power generation and focusing systems developed specifically for the war effort. "What about the defensive systems?" she asked. Her technician activated another test, this one demonstrating the new shield technology that protected human warships. Energy barriers flared to life around a test vessel, deflecting simulated enemy fire with ease. "The shield generators are exceeding all specifications," he reported. "They can absorb and redirect energy attacks that would cripple traditional armor systems. Combined with our improved hull materials, these ships should be able to survive battles that would destroy conventional vessels." The defensive innovations were just as important as the weapons. Human engineers had developed new materials that were both lighter and stronger than anything previously available. The ship's hulls could absorb tremendous punishment while maintaining their structural integrity, allowing them to continue fighting even after taking significant damage. Meanwhile, on Earth itself, the planet had become the coordination center for the largest military operation in human history. In bunkers and command centers around the globe, thousands of officers and analysts worked to plan the coming campaign against the hegemony. General Harrison stood before a massive holographic map showing hegemony space in 3 dimensions. Hundreds of star systems were marked with different colored symbols indicating military installations, population centers, and industrial facilities. Intelligence suggests the hegemony has approximately 55,000 military vessels distributed across their territory. He briefed the assembled strategic planning team. Their largest concentration is here, in the Xanthari home system with roughly 12,000 ships. Colonel Martinez studied the display carefully. What about their defensive capabilities? Do they have early warning systems that could detect our approach? Limited, General Harrison replied. Hegemony species tend to rely on traditional hyperspace detection networks. Our new stealth systems should allow us to achieve tactical surprise in most target systems. The human fleet wasn't just larger than anything the galaxy had seen before. It was also more advanced. Stealth technology, improved faster-than-light drives, enhanced communication systems, and artificial intelligence that could coordinate complex operations across vast distances gave humanity significant advantages beyond simple numbers. But perhaps, the most important advantage was something that couldn't be measured in technical specifications: the unified determination of an entire species that had been pushed too far. In manufacturing centers across the Sol system, workers put in 18-hour shifts without complaint. Families who had lost loved ones on New Harmony worked with quiet intensity, knowing that every ship they helped build brought humanity closer to justice for their dead. The transformation of human society was complete. Every resource, every person, every piece of technology had been focused on a single goal. Artists designed propaganda posters that reminded workers what they were fighting for. Scientists developed new technologies that could give human forces the edge they needed. 2 years and 3 days after the burning of New Harmony, every communication system in hegemony space received the same message simultaneously. It came in perfect translations of all 12 member species languages, transmitted on frequencies that should have been impossible to access from outside their territory. Admiral Thexfar was reviewing fleet deployments in his command center when the message arrived. The holographic display that normally showed tactical information suddenly shifted to display the image of a human female in military uniform. She appeared to be middle-aged, with graying hair and eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Sol Defense Fleet," the image said in perfect Xanthari. 2 years ago, forces under your command murdered 2,300,000 human civilians on the colony world of New Harmony. You destroyed our children while they slept in their beds. You burned our homes while families gathered for their evening meals. Admiral Thexfar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. He had expected some kind of diplomatic protest eventually. But this theatrical display was beneath the dignity of civilized discourse. He moved to shut off the transmission, but found that his controls were not responding. "You left a message claiming that primitive species exist only at the sufferance of their betters," the human continued. "Today, you will learn what happens when primitives decide that their betters have forgotten their place in the natural order." The transmission cut off, leaving Admiral Thexfar staring at a blank display. Around him, his officers exchanged uncertain glances. The fact that the humans had been able to override hegemony communication systems was troubling, but hardly a serious threat. "Send a response," he ordered his communications officer. "Inform the humans that their theatrical gestures change nothing. They remain inferior beings whose survival depends on the mercy of the Hegemony Alliance." "Sir," the communications officer replied nervously, "I'm reading massive hyperspace disturbances throughout hegemony space. Multiple locations reporting simultaneous arrivals of unknown vessels." Before Admiral Thexvar could respond, reports began flooding in from across their territory. Outpost commanders, planetary governors, and fleet captains all sent the same impossible message. Human warships had appeared in their systems, and they were appearing in numbers that defied belief. Commander Ilek stood on the bridge of his patrol cruiser in the Kepler system, watching his sensors with growing disbelief. What had started as routine readings of empty space was now showing contact after contact after contact as human vessels dropped out of hyperspace. "How many ships?" he asked his sensor operator. "I'm reading over 8,000 contacts, Commander. They're still arriving." Commander Ilek studied the tactical display, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The human vessels were smaller than traditional hegemony warships, but they moved with precision that suggested advanced coordination systems. They formed perfect geometric patterns as they emerged from hyperspace, like pieces of a vast machine falling into place. "Send a demand for identification and purpose," he ordered. The response came immediately, Broadcast on all frequencies in perfect Zinthari. We are here for you. Similar scenes played out across 47 star systems simultaneously. In each location, hegemony forces found themselves facing human fleets that outnumbered them by margins they had thought impossible. The humans made no demands, offered no terms for negotiation. They simply began systematic destruction of every military installation in each system. In the Vega system, Captain Zexty commanded a defensive platform that protected the system's primary industrial complex. She watched in horror as human ships approached her station in perfect formation, their weapons already charging for attack. "Incoming transmission," reported her communications officer. The message was brief and delivered in emotionless tones. "Your platform has been designated for destruction. Evacuate immediately. You have 10 minutes. Captain Zexty's forearms trembled as she processed the ultimatum. The human fleet contained nearly 15,000 vessels, while her defensive platform mounted weapons designed to fight off raids by a few dozen ships at most. "All stations begin evacuation procedures," she ordered. There was no point in sacrificing her crew in a hopeless battle. The evacuation pods had barely cleared the platform when the human attack began. Beams of coherent plasma lanced across the void with surgical precision, dismantling the defensive station piece by piece. The humans didn't simply destroy their target. They systematically removed it from existence, leaving no debris larger than a shuttlecraft. But they didn't fire on the evacuation pods. Captain Zexty watched from her escape craft as the human fleet methodically eliminated every military installation in the system, while carefully avoiding any civilian targets. On the hegemony capital world of Zenthar Prime, emergency sessions of the ruling council convened as reports continued to arrive from across their territory. The scope of the human assault was beyond anything they had imagined possible. Preliminary reports indicate coordinated attacks on 47 systems, announced Minister Kexvar, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Human forces appear to be targeting military installations exclusively. They're avoiding civilian populations and infrastructure. Chancellor Thekmore studied the holographic map showing the locations of human attacks. Every major military installation in hegemony space was under assault, while the attacks were being carried out by forces that collectively numbered in the hundreds of thousands of vessels. "How is this possible?" she asked. "Our intelligence indicated that the humans possessed maybe 200 military ships. Where did they find the resources to build such a fleet?" "Unknown, Chancellor, but the evidence is undeniable. They appear to have constructed the largest military force in recorded galactic history." Minister Hexali, the hegemony's military coordinator, activated additional displays showing fleet positions throughout their territory. "We have approximately 55,000 ships distributed across our space. If we concentrate our forces, we might be able to engage the humans on favorable terms." Chancellor Thekmore considered the options. The hegemony had ruled this region of space for over 1,000 years through superior technology and coordinated military power. But they had never faced an enemy that could match their numbers, much less exceed them so dramatically. "Send orders to all fleet commanders," she decided. "Concentrate our forces at Kepler's Gate. We'll make our stand there and show these primitives what happens when they challenge a mature civilization." Admiral Thexvar received the concentration orders aboard his flagship in the Rigel system. Around him, his fleet of 1,200 vessels prepared to join the largest military engagement in hegemony history. He felt confident that superior tactics and technology would prevail over mere numbers. "Set course for Kepler's Gate," he ordered, "and send a message to the human fleet. Inform them that Admiral Thexvar, destroyer of New Harmony, challenges them to face the consequences of their aggression." The human response came within minutes, transmitted directly to his personal communication system. "We accept your challenge. Every soul you murdered on New Harmony will be avenged." The gathering at Kepler's Gate took 3 days as hegemony fleets from across their territory converged on the strategic system. Ships representing all 12 member species took positions in a massive defensive formation that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. Admiral Thexvar stood on his flagship's bridge watching the final fleet elements arrive. The combined hegemony force numbered 52,000 vessels, the most powerful military concentration in their history. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "we're detecting hyperspace disturbances at the edge of the system. Something large is approaching." The first wave of human ships began emerging from hyperspace at maximum sensor range. Admiral Thexvar watched the contacts multiply on his display. 1,000 ships, then 5,000, then 10,000. The human fleet was massive, but still within the range of what he had expected to face. "Prepare for engagement," he ordered. "All ships assume attack formations." Then the second wave arrived. Another 10,000 human vessels dropped out of hyperspace, taking positions behind the first group. Then a third wave. Then a fourth. Admiral Thexvar stared at his tactical display in growing disbelief as the human fleet continued to expand. 20,000 ships, 50,000, 100,000. The contacts kept appearing until his sensors could no longer track individual vessels. "How many?" he asked his tactical officer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm reading over. 500,000 individual contacts, Admiral. They're arranged in perfect formation extending beyond our sensor range." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of electronic systems. Every officer stared at the displays showing the impossible scope of the human fleet. Ships stretched across, the void like stars in the night sky, their numbers so vast that they seemed to merge into solid walls of metal and energy. Admiral Thexvar had spent his career studying military history and tactics. He had commanded fleets in dozens of engagements against various species throughout the galaxy. Never in his experience, never in the recorded history of any civilization, had anyone assembled a military force of such magnitude. The Battle of Kepler's Gate lasted 17 hours and 43 minutes. When it ended, the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted forever. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES New Harmony, her flagship named for the colony, that had died 2 years before. Through the massive viewports, she could see the wreckage of what had once been the most powerful military force in known space. The hegemony fleet of 52,000 vessels had fought with desperate courage. In those final hours, their commanders had thrown everything they had at the human armada, using tactics refined over centuries of warfare and weapons that represented the pinnacle of 12 different civilizations' military technology. It hadn't been enough. Admiral Chen watched as her ships moved through the debris field, searching for survivors among the scattered remains of Admiral Thexvar's fleet. The human forces had taken casualties. Nearly 8,000 ships had been destroyed or damaged in the engagement. But the hegemony fleet had been completely annihilated. "Admiral," reported Captain Martinez from the communications station, "we're receiving surrender transmissions from 17 different star systems. Hegemony regional commanders are requesting terms." Admiral Chen nodded, studying the tactical displays that showed the positions of her remaining forces. Even after the losses at Kepler's Gate, the human fleet still numbered over 400,000 vessels. It was more than enough to occupy every important system in hegemony space. "What about Admiral Thexvar?" she asked. Captain Martinez checked his displays. "His flagship was destroyed early in the battle, Admiral. No survivors detected." Admiral Chen felt no satisfaction at the news. Her daughter and granddaughter were still dead and no amount of vengeance could bring them back. But at least the being responsible for their deaths would never again threaten innocent people. "Begin Phase 2 operations," she ordered. "All fleet commanders are to proceed to their assigned systems and secure hegemony military installations. Remember, we're here to end their ability to project military power, not to harm civilian populations." Across hegemony space, human fleets moved with the precision of a vast machine. Each target system received the same message as the human ships arrived. Military forces were to surrender immediately, while civilian populations were promised safety and protection. On Zenthar Prime, Chancellor Thekmor watched the human fleet take position around her homeworld. The ships hung in space like a metal constellation, their weapons trained on the planetary defense platforms that had protected the Zenthari capital for over 1,000 years. "Incoming transmission from the human flagship," announced her communications officer. The message was delivered by a human officer who spoke perfect Zenthari. "Chancellor Thekmor, I am Commander Williams of the Sol Defense Fleet. You have 60 minutes to order the surrender of all military installations in this system. Comply, and your civilian population will not be harmed. Refuse, and we will systematically destroy every military target on your world." Chancellor Thekmor studied the tactical displays showing the human fleet. There were over 20,000 ships surrounding Zenthar Prime, each one capable of reducing her capital city to ash in minutes. Her own defensive forces numbered fewer than 300 vessels. "Send our surrender," she ordered quietly. The age of hegemony dominance was over. Similar surrenders happened across dozens of star systems. Some hegemony commanders tried to resist, believing that human forces might be vulnerable to guerrilla tactics or defensive warfare. They learned quickly that humanity had prepared for every contingency. On Kepler 7, Admiral Vexmar attempted to organize a defensive stand using the planet's natural mountain ranges as cover for his remaining forces. He had hidden 3,000 ships in deep caverns, planning to launch surprise attacks against the human occupation fleet. The human response was swift and overwhelming. Orbital bombardment platforms eliminated his hidden bases with surgical precision, while marine landing forces secured every strategic location on the planet's surface. Admiral Vexmar's resistance collapsed in less than 6 hours, but the humans showed mercy to those who surrendered. Hegemony officers who laid down their weapons were treated as prisoners of war, according to established galactic conventions. Civilian populations found their lives largely unchanged, except that human forces now maintained order, instead of hegemony troops. Dr. Elena Vasquez walked through the captured Zenthari research facility on Rigel 4, studying the alien technology. With professional interest, the hegemony species had developed impressive weapons and defensive systems, but their approach to military engineering was fundamentally different from humanity's. They focused on building individual ships that were as powerful as possible, she explained to her research team. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, but it took them years to construct and required massive crews to operate effectively. She gestured to the holographic displays showing captured Zenthari warship designs. Humans took the opposite approach. We built ships that were simpler, more standardized, and could be produced quickly using automated systems. Instead of making each ship perfect, we made enough ships to overwhelm any opposition. The captured hegemony technology would be studied and reverse-engineered, but the humans were already developing systems that surpassed anything their former enemies had created. The war effort had pushed human science and engineering to new heights. On Earth, President Chen addressed a joint session of the World Council in the rebuilt United Nations building. The chamber was packed with representatives from every nation and colony, all waiting to hear how their species would move forward after achieving the impossible. 2 years ago, the Hegemony Alliance sought to teach humanity a lesson about our place in the galaxy, she began. They murdered over 2 million of our people to demonstrate their superiority. Today, we have responded with a lesson of our own. The chamber erupted in applause that lasted for several minutes. When quiet returned, President Chen continued her address. The Hegemony fleet has been destroyed. Their military installations have been captured or neutralized. 12 species that once thought themselves our superiors now exist under human protection. But this victory comes with enormous responsibility. She activated displays showing the territorial extent of what had once been hegemony space. Dozens of star systems containing billions of alien civilians, who now look to humanity for leadership. We could rule these systems as conquerors, extracting tribute and demanding submission from our former enemies. But that would make us no better than they were. Instead, we will govern as protectors, ensuring that no species in our care ever again faces the threat of unprovoked aggression. The response from the occupied systems was mixed. Some populations welcomed human rule, particularly those species that had been oppressed minorities within the Hegemony Alliance. Others resented the occupation, even though human administrators made efforts to respect local customs and governing traditions. On Vega Prime, Governor Lisa Park worked with local Vegarian officials to establish a new system of government that combined human oversight with traditional Vegarian cultural structures. The process was slow and sometimes frustrating, but it was necessary for long-term stability. The key is showing them that we're here to protect, not exploit, she explained to her staff during a weekly planning meeting. Every decision we make sends a message about what kind of rulers humanity will be. Her approach was being replicated across the occupied territories. Human administrators worked with local leaders to maintain essential services, protect civilian populations, and gradually rebuild societies that had been disrupted by the war. But not everyone accepted the new order peacefully. Resistance groups formed on several worlds, carrying out attacks against human forces and the local leaders who cooperated with them. Colonel Sarah Martinez led a counterinsurgency operation on Kepler 9, where Zenthari extremists had organized a campaign of sabotage and assassination. Her forces moved carefully through the alien city, working to capture the resistance leaders without harming innocent civilians. Remember, she told her troops, these people are fighting because they're afraid and angry. They lost their independence in a single day, and some of them will never accept human rule. Our job is to show them that we're not the monsters they expect us to be. The operation was successful, but it highlighted the ongoing challenges of governing former enemies. Human forces would need to maintain security while demonstrating that their rule was beneficial rather than oppressive. Meanwhile, in the outer regions of former hegemony space, Human exploration fleets were making contact with species that had been previously unknown. The Hegemony Alliance had apparently suppressed information about many civilizations in their territory, keeping them isolated and dependent. Commander James Harrison led first contact operations with the Crystalline Collective, a species of silicon-based beings who had been forbidden to develop space travel by their hegemony overseers. His ships approached their homeworld carefully, broadcasting messages of peace and friendship. "We are humans from the Sol system," he transmitted on multiple frequencies. "We have defeated the forces that kept your people isolated. We come offering friendship and the chance to join the broader galactic community as equals."